biennial budget for the years 2012 to 13 will come to order. We roll into the fourth week of the budget process, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Germana?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Present.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Brady?
Present.
Ms. Conley?
Here.
There's a quorum.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody who has signed in for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, no one has signed in to speak.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item number 4A, which is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of October 24th. Those minutes are in your packet, and when someone is ready, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Brady and seconded by Ms. Conwell to approve the minutes of the October 24th meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes for October 24th are approved. Is there a motion regarding the minutes for October 25th?
Motion to adopt.
We have a motion. Is there a second? It has been moved by Councilperson Greenspan and seconded by Ms. Conwell to approve the minutes for October the 25th. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes for October 25th, 2011 are approved as well. We go on to item number 5, matters referred to the committee. Madam Clerk, would you please read the resolution?
Resolution number 2011-0291, a resolution adopting the 2012-2013 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay, that resolution is now before us, and before we resume the presentations from the departments, I would like to do two things. The first is that I would like to call to your attention the item that's been passed out, proposed substitute resolution. It's resolution number 2011-0291. And by way of background, when the original budget resolution was presented to the council, the administration did not have everything quite yet prepared, and so we received the resolution itself, but not the attachment, which contained the actual resolution and the capital improvements plan. What this item does is that it simply gives us the as-introduced version in its full form. There are no changes in any of the budget contained here. The only change is that I understand at the law director's request, the immediately effective language was tweaked a little bit, but it's purely technical and doesn't reflect any change of substance. So I would ask if someone would make a motion that we substitute this version for the version that was originally introduced to make this the version that's before the council.
So moved.
We have a motion from Council President Conley, seconded by Councilman Schron. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the substitution say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and this version is substituted and becomes the version before the committee. The second item is that I would like to bring to everybody's attention the single sheet 8.5 by 14 item that says decision item list 10/31/2011. And this provides a presentation of most of the decision items that have been presented before the committee so far, along with my recommendation. And what I would like for the committee to do is to use this sheet as a consent agenda, and to go through these items overnight, and when we start the afternoon session tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I would like for any of my colleagues who go through this and have concerns about any of the recommendations to say, no, I don't want that item cleared, and I would like there to be more discussion on that item. Any item that no objection is heard will be submitted in that form when we prepare the next version of the budget bill, which is expected to be done on November the 14th. Even after that, if someone says, well, I really thought this item through and I want to propose something different, a further amendment could still be proposed. But we're looking to make some preliminary decisions in preparation for the next version. Now, there are some items on here where my recommendation is to hold it for further information. So those items will not be resolved tomorrow, but there are items where specific recommendations have been made, and so I would like everyone to just review this, to come back tomorrow, and we'll see if perhaps some items can be cleared by consensus, and whatever items people request additional discussion on will be further discussed before we prepare anything for November the 14th. Does anyone have any questions on that process, Councilman Schrein?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Have the recommendations been discussed with the administration that you have on this sheet?
Good question.
To Councilman Schrein, no, they have not, but I would add that the vast majority of recommendations involve departments that are not administration-run departments, and so that's why that is. Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these items are items that have been presented to council.
Yes, only things regarding departments or agencies that we have already discussed are here. Nothing that we're yet to hear is included here, and those will come forward at a future time.
The reason I ask is because, quote, Jeff Mowry, I'm doing a deep dive in the budget and might have some additional recommendations. But these, I just want to understand that these are just from groups that have presented to us already.
That's correct. And there is nothing whatsoever that anyone who has additional recommendations and suggestions, there will be plenty of opportunity to bring those forward. We just want to see if we can make some decisions regarding some of the things that we've already heard. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. The next item is that I would like to call forward the Director of the Department of Human Resources, Ms. Elise Hara, to present on your budget. Madam Director, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Elise Hara, Director of Human Resources and Employment Council. I'm going to give you a brief overview. As you know, and as I presented at the mid-year budget meetings, we are in a state of flux with the HR department with posting new positions and consolidating the services that will be provided to the entire county as opposed to individual departments. So Human Resources is responsible for personnel issues, benefits, administering those benefits, and workers' comp. So I'm going to highlight some numbers for you, but I'm also going to break them down in terms of the benefits group and the workers' comp group. There are 6 employees in the benefits group, and those salaries come out of the benefits funds, that $85 million. So they're not in, per se, the HR budget that I'm presenting to you. The other 2 employees come from workers' comp, and so their funding source comes from yet another separate self-fund. What we are asking for 2012 is in the following breakdown. I anticipate that my department will have 47 employees who will handle personnel matters. Those are the analysts and the specialists and the training folks that I identified for you at the previous presentation. The salaries projected for 2012 for those 47 employees would be somewhere around $2.3 million. If you add their benefits, that's $874,000, and I'm rounding these numbers up a little bit. And so that covers 47 employees who will be assigned to various departments to provide personnel assistance to the directors and the supervisors. You add to those 47 employees an additional 6 that I mentioned that they're almost in their own, well, they really are in their own little unit. I believe they're actually locked separate because of the information that they process on a daily basis. Those folks handle all the benefits questions, the enrollment questions. They work with Kaiser, they work with all the providers. So that group is not included in those 47 employees. And then we have 2 or 3 workers that we have, employees that manage the workers' comp for the entire county, keeping in mind that the benefits folks and the workers' comp staff, they not only support the 5,000 employees under the charter, they actually support all county employees, the 8,000 who are eligible to receive benefits and workers' comp throughout Cuyahoga County. A breakdown a little bit of what that personnel budget looks like. Obviously, there's a director. I have 2 deputy directors. We have a new position of recruitment and retention that was recently filled. That is a manager. I have another manager who has been made an offer for training, so that person will handle all training within the county, unless it's specific county training that is budgeted in by departments. Public Works comes to mind. HHS is another one that has their own training facilities and specific training for their social workers. We anticipate the training manager will have at least 2 employees in these projections that will assist with the training, and I'm talking about ethics training. Directors ask us for employee morale training. That's what this group will do. Supervisory training, the mandatory training that was completed for 777 supervisors, that's what this unit will do. I have several program officers in that classification doing a variety of different tasks that are necessary for the operations of the department. And then I anticipate, although I will know better after the end of this month, whether these numbers are exact or not, 8 specialists. Those are the HR personnel who actually operate as mini HR directors for the directors to address their day-to-day needs, and 12 analysts. But I will have a better sense as to whether that distribution is accurate once I see the pool of candidates that we have currently testing. But we're talking about a total of 20 individuals. For For those of you who may want to know what the salary range is for those positions, the specialist salary range is as posted 56,400 to roughly 67,683. The analyst's positions are 43,000 to a range of 51,006. That is what is currently posted as the salary range. All of the individuals who qualify for those postings have had the opportunity to apply. If they qualified, they've had the opportunity to take the test. The analysts are scheduled to take the test this Thursday and Friday, so I will have a much better sense as to what my department looks like by the end of the month. We also have a line item for contracts. In the 2012 budget, I have a line item for $211,098. Those would be contracts. Archer, we have to maintain the class plan. Although we anticipate trying to weaning off that process and doing it more in-house with the recruitment and retention manager, we still need to consult with them on modifications to the plans that will be happening on an annual basis and will be presented to you. We also have TimeLink, that's at a cost of $19,507, and TimeLink is the Chronos and timekeeping in the county. And then the drug toxicology common pleas that was just entered into this year as an interagency agreement, that's a cost of $102,000 with a chargeback to the agencies that are using it. The Archer Company this year cost $98,000 because of the contract that we had for them for the special project, the class plan. Typically, I think that's a contract that costs around $60,000 for the year, and I'm hoping to reduce that going forward. I also anticipate, well, and I don't think it's included in this particular line item, but just something to think about, that in the future, because all of the analysts may not be certified as PHRs at the end of the day because it's a preferred certification, I would like to include an amount probably ranging from $5,000 to $7,000 to be able to reward those who and reimburse those who take the test and pass it successfully. Again, part of the mission of the department, and I think throughout the county, is to make sure that people are getting incentivized to increase their skills and show their expertise. So I do not anticipate that my entire group will be certified. A majority hopefully will be. All the specialists must be certified. But that's something that I anticipate and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to do in the future. The big question is, how is any of my added costs being offset by the other agencies? These are projections. I had to rely on other directors to identify the folks that they felt were conducting human resource work. I have a general sense as to who those go-to people were, but I didn't include many of the payroll people. So what I asked the sheriff to do and the fiscal officer to do, as well as numbers from the clerk of courts, is to give me a ballpark number of who was on their staff who conducted HR work and what positions would they take off and could they quantify those positions. And the number that I was given, the projection, is $1,006,134. So I don't want to say it's an absolute wash, but, and I really won't know what it comes down to until probably the end of the year when I'm done with all of my hiring. And then the directors can start looking at their budgets and saying, okay, clearly we didn't need these folks. And of course, layoffs are a big part of the process too. But if you look at last year's salaries in 2011, for just the personnel folks, it was at 1.3. If you look at 2012, the projection is 2.3. If you do the math, I'm taking about $1 million from these other agencies that were absorbed by the charter, and it's almost a wash. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and we will start the questioning with the chairperson of the Human Resources Committee, Councilwoman Conwell.
To the chair, to the director. Now you spoke of, you do have a breakdown of the 4 new positions, and you're still going through that for the analyst. And what I need is, could you provide a list to my committee regarding the 4 positions and the salary ranges when you finish the testing?
Yes, to Councilwoman Conwell through the chair. I will remind Councilwoman Conwell that that information was provided in a very detailed memo that had been attached initially, but I'd be happy to submit that information again. And just to be clear, the 4 positions and the salary ranges?
And how many staff and their
Yes.
salary ranges? Because I know you stated that you hadn't finished completing that, so we would like a breakdown for that. And also a breakdown of the previous HR employees that moved to other departments. I believe it was stated in the budget that some staff were moved to other departments. Could you provide a breakdown of that? I'm assuming that
Councilwoman-
old HR employees moved into law department, et cetera, different.
Yes.
So breakdown of that. And you recently stated regarding the Archer study, it cost $98,000. For how long was that?
That was an 18-week project specific to the class plan, and that was, if you recall, we went through a bidding process. Some of the other bidders were closer to $200,000, and it didn't make sense.
But only for 18 weeks?
It was an 18-week project that was bid, yes, all of them. I think we had 3 or 4 bids, and they were all much higher than $98,000.
Will we need their services again?
Archer, so long as our class plan is not restructured and redesigned, we will need the services of Archer because they are instrumental in using the forms that they have that are proprietary. So any analysis we need to do with respect to calculation of retention points, classifications, new classifications. I do like the fact that we have an independent third party as a consultant reviewing the new classifications so that they don't look subjective. So while we have the existing class plan, I can't say that we won't use Archer moving forward, but I am trying to internalize a lot more of the duties that Archer had done for us in the past, so that I'm hopeful that I will be able to negotiate and reduce that contract. The other thing that I was trying to do with the contract is to see if they would allow us to use their proprietary information internally. They're never going to let me have another consultant use their forms. But if we can do the work ourselves internally, that's part of what I'd like to enter into a new agreement with.
So moving forward, if we do need another study, we will go through the bidding process again?
Yes, and that would be a very expensive process, but yes.
Okay. The additional 1.3 approved requests that you're asking for, that will include new positions and anything else?
It'll include salaries for 47 individuals in the department that don't have a budget source outside of that, meaning workers' comp and the benefits group that I discussed. So that is correct.
Moving on to the employee health and wellness, the total cost for additional healthcare benefits, is the increased healthcare cost for domestic partners, medical benefits included in this budget?
I'm sorry, I came prepared, Councilwoman, to discuss my HR budget. The benefits budget is a separate budget that would come out of that $85 million funding that doesn't have anything to do with my HR budget.
We'll hold that. And with the classification changes through the chair to the director, with the proposed classification changes, will there be any positions remaining below $30,000 for employees? Or will it bring them up to a better average? We have a lot of employees, clerk of courts, various agencies that make less than $30,000. Will they be brought up?
Councilwoman Conwell, through the chair, what I can say to that effect is that there are still positions that are being reviewed, and if they fall into a new classification or an existing classification and they are under that minimum of the band for the pay grade, they will be brought up to that pay grade objectively.
And back to the Archer question, so the Archer study, finding that we may need some more classifications done, that's in the contract, they're willing to continue that, correct?
Yes, Councilwoman Conwell, through the chair, the project had to be completed in 18 weeks. And to that effect, we got the information that we needed. But part of the contract was also to be able to avail ourselves of their consulting service on the particular project. So it's not like they delivered in 18 weeks and they're gone. We're still very much working with them and the directors in the event that new classifications are needed as a result of the plan.
Okay, I believe final question. So going through this process, through the chair to the director, going through this process, there are still some open. Your budget hasn't totally been finalized. There's still going to be possibly some additions that may occur.
Councilwoman Conwell, through the chair. I believe that if council approves the budget as presented to you, I can accomplish the tasks that I outlined at mid-year budget and that I'm presenting to you today. What I can't tell you is, will I have 8 specialists or will I have 6? Will I have 12 analysts or will I have 14? But in terms of how we have formulated this budget, I anticipate I'll be able to meet my personnel needs in order to operate and support the county.
Thank you.
Councilman Brady.
Thank you, through the chair to the director. You actually spoke to this as part of your presentation, but, and it's not strictly budgetary, but I think it's relevant, particularly considering the nature of your department. If you could briefly sort of try to convey to the council what the difference is between HR a year ago and HR now, and what are the kind of broader challenges you have as we transition into a new way of doing business.
Councilman Brady, through the chair, I'd be delighted. When I first took charge of the HR department, it was an interesting org chart. I think I had presented it to you in my PowerPoint, and we had a lot of dislocation in terms of services that were being provided. And also the way the department was set up wasn't conducive to supporting an additional 2,500 employees that had been absorbed through the charter. So the first thing that had to happen, the lawyers went to the law department, and I had 3 lawyers that needed to be transferred because the goal, while being a lawyer myself, was not to create a separate mini law department. You need to work in collaboration with an existing law department, and there are clear, defined reasons for that: privilege, communication, documentation. So that meant that 2 managers were moved outside of the department, and there were no more individuals who were handling the labor and employment matters unless we were working collaboratively with the law department. So I tried to simplify the structure of the department to make it more efficient, hence separating the second in command basically into 2 roles. One, deputy labor and employment, who would primarily deal with the specialists and analysts and handle the FMLA questions, the employment questions, the Title VII questions, the leave requests, and really monitor that and assist the supervisors in conducting appropriate discipline. Because another thing that I observed through my short tenure here is that personnel files do not tell the story that they need to about employees. You should be able to pick up a personnel file, understand when the individual was hired, what kind of discipline they had. If their evaluations are spectacular, then there really shouldn't be any discipline. The two should not conflict. And there really wasn't a good, consistent telling of a story. So one of the things that the executive has charged me with is get a consistent story and a consistent process throughout each of these departments, but having to understand the subtlety of 31 collective bargaining agreements, limitations of having to deal with classified civil servants, and the different body of rules that govern perhaps each separate department. So part of my mission was to raise the bar in terms of the expertise that came to the table to serve the county. And that's why I came before you and asked for the two most important positions in my mind, analysts and specialists. Now, I do think, based on discussions with the directors, that, and understandably so, they want an HR presence in their departments, and how they couldn't really operate any other way. But that doesn't mean that you create separate, isolated departments on their own that may create the same problems that existed in the past. Very inconsistent application of process, very different policies and procedures. So it is my role, with the assistance of my deputies, to make sure that we consistently apply and teach the specialists and analysts what they need to do and how to problem solve. The other big difference that I noticed is, and I could go on forever, so I won't, but the other big difference that I noticed was the HR department was very reactive. So if there's a problem, if there's a fire that needs to be put out, if there's something that needs to be addressed, we deal with it. In my legal career, and also having had HR department under me, it is much better for any employer, certainly the county, to be more proactive with the problems. I don't want to hear that we didn't administrate FMLA correctly and now we're looking at a lawsuit. I want somebody to tell me, we have some problems here, let's make sure that we're advising the supervisors and training them correctly. I want the analysts and the specialists to be my eyes and ears, to say, this particular director is having problems with this group and they need this type of training. And now with a training manager, I can actually provide a tailored menu to that director that may not work or be necessary for everybody at the county, but is needed because we're listening to that director's needs. I have a set of directors with very different personalities and very different needs. They are my customers. I need to make sure that the specialists and the analysts that we put in place are a fit for them and have the right expertise. It's not going to happen overnight. Many of the folks who have applied from the outside world, if they're in the private sector, will have a learning curve because they need to learn how government operates and there are differences. So I'm trying to pool and build a team that meshes both institutional knowledge as well as a higher standard, and people who really understand the FMLA, the ADA, and the intricacies of employment law. I'm not going to protect the county of all lawsuits, but it is my job, or I see it, to at least put us in a defensible position every time there's an issue. It's not a perfect world, but I think it's a little better.
Thank you, Director.
Okay. Madam Director, looking at pages 6, VI-22 and 23 in the budget book, can you explain why it is that the decision item requests, the recommendation is $2,046,068 for the centralization process, but then in the budget summary on the left of 6-22, where it says 2012 approved requests, it only says $1,385,058. Can you explain why those two are different?
Not sure what you're referring to. Okay. But perhaps the fiscal department will be able to assist me with that question.
Director.
Good afternoon, Matt Rubino, Office of Budget Management. Councilman Miller, that $2 million number includes the transfer of the old HR budgetary structure to the new one. As the director had stated, they're doing more centralized or consolidated formulation of not just the office, but the budget. And we took the old budgetary structure and condensed it down to a single divisional budget structure. So this is more or less a nuance of how we presented the reporting on that decision item table. But the actual net increase up, that transfer of salary dollars and fringe benefit dollars of those employees from other agencies, is that $1.3 million net increase.
Okay, and Director, a follow-up on that. The director testified that the offsets from the other departments was approximately $1,006,000, but the increased request, the budget item was $1,385,000. Can you explain the difference between those two
Yeah,
numbers?
Mr. Chairman, the budget that's presented right now, we're making the assumption that we will spend between $300,000 and $400,000 more on the new consolidated structure. But there are obvious benefits that we believe over the next few years are going to pay dividends. So it's, in some cases, the county is going to spend less on certain things. In some cases, we may be spending more. This is one example. But by and large, the transfer of budgetary resources from other agencies that had HR staff, it offsets a lion's share of that increase in staffing in the new HR structure.
Okay, thank you. Director, can you give us some idea of what new things account for that $380,000 difference?
To the chair, some of it has to do with some increased staffing levels. For example, there never was a training manager in the HR department, and I'm consolidating that function and adding some personnel. But dollar to dollar, I'd have to go back and get you that information because there is a cost factor. The other challenge with this is that many of the individual departments sometimes include their payroll folks in the HR bubble, and I still have in the department a total of 7 individuals who do time and attendance, and it's necessary that we keep them at this point in the department. But other agencies also have payroll individuals, and what I believe Director Wade and I will be examining next year is what are the consolidations of payroll, who's really doing time and attendance, who's really just doing pure payroll. We just haven't had an opportunity. And the internal structure, and what I'm referring to is IT, the computer systems, everybody talking to each other. But that is another area of potential savings that we will be examining closely, and that'll be a collaboration between myself, fiscal, and the IT department. But dollars to dollars for the $333,000, I can't answer that at this moment.
Mr. Director, I would like if you could work on getting me a little better accounting as to what accounts for that difference, just so that we get a sense of what we're doing.
Okay.
Can you get that to us within a few days?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll work with the fiscal director.
Okay. Councilman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on the 2013 base budget. And I noticed from, looking at the other funds line, there's only 12,000 in 2012, and it jumps up to 1,325,000 in 13. And I'm wondering why that's listed as other funds as opposed to general fund.
I'm going to address your question with my deputy, if that's okay. She's more expert in that question.
Hi, Lisa Durkin, Deputy Director of Operations for Human Resources. To the Chair, to the Councilman, I'm sorry, could you repeat what area you're looking at?
I'm looking at page 6-22.
And I'm sure, I don't believe we have that particular page here. Could you just read?
Okay, yeah, let me just read off what we have. So under general fund in 2012 base budget, $2,470,706, plus then the approved request, an additional 1.385 million. Then under 2013, you have the base budget of $2,432,873. Approved request, this is under general fund, 1.325 million. However, the 1.3 appears to be coming out of, there's a 1.325299 under other funds as opposed to general.
Mr. Chairman and the council member, that number should be under the general fund column. It's just aligned incorrectly, so it's a typographical error on the page.
Okay, good. Okay, in your budget book, under 2013 base budget, where it says other funds, it should be either 0 or 12,000, but it's not 1,000,003. Anything else, Councilman?
I think just to be clear, under 2011, you're projected to end with almost 7 million, and then the additional 1.385 for 2012 is mainly due in part to the addition of 17 new FTEs moving over.
Councilman Rogers, through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman Miller, may I email that information to you, or how would you like me to present that?
I would like if you could email it to Trevor Elkins, our budget person. Or, I'm sorry, Trevor.
Exactly here.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
He's a mayor now, maybe.
Okay. Next, we will call forward the Human Resources Commission. Rebecca
Kopczynski.
What?
Kopczynski.
Kopczynski.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Kopczynski.
Good
Please
afternoon.
continue.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Kopczynski. I'm the relatively new administrator for the Human Resource Commission for the county. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I have just a few items that I'd like to present today because, as you all know, the commissioners originally presented budget information to you at the mid-year report, and they have made some progress on some initiatives since that time, but we are still relatively new in terms of our operations, as I think I've been here 7 weeks now. So just to sort of recap on the role of the commission, as you know, it was established by the charter, and it serves primarily two basic functions: an appellate function that was previously served by the State Personnel Board of Review, and an advisory capacity to the county's HR department. The mission and vision are coincide, in fact, with those of the HR department, primarily to administer a system of employment that's based on merit and fitness, and also to ensure that the HR system is based on best practices, professional standards, and efficient management. The HRC has established an office. We are located in Lakeside Place, which is on the other side of the Justice Center, up on the 4th floor, in an area previously occupied by the Solid Waste District. We have 3 appointed commissioners, and I think you're all aware of that. We also now have a full-time administrator and a full-time coordinator, and we're in the process of retaining 7 hearing officers who will be functioning as independent contractors. Probably the main accomplishment that the HRC has achieved since they last presented to you was that their administrative rules have been established and approved by council. So we are working with those actively every day in applying them to cases that are coming before us. They created the positions of administrator and coordinator and have selected those positions. And as I mentioned, they're in the process of retaining hearing officers. And they have advised the Human Resources Department on the pay ordinance, classification changes, subsequent reorganization as a result of the classification changes, some health benefits design issues, and compensation decisions. Looking forward, the main probably focus for the next several weeks is to get our appeals processed and to get these hearings disposed of. We are anticipating being able to train the hearing officers at the end of November, hoping that that contract procedure is finalized in the next couple of weeks. And that remains our main priority for the time being. We currently have 25 cases pending, and we're anticipating more. But that sort of poses a black hole in our analysis because we don't really know how many. We're in the process of developing a docketing system so we can track our cases, to monitor our efficiencies in that process, and also to monitor the effectiveness of the hearing officers who are involved in the hearings. And as a follow-up to that, we'd like to develop reporting procedures to assess our efficiencies, and then also to develop evaluation procedures for our hearing officers who are involved in the processes. And in the meantime, also continue to advise HR on a number of their initiatives, training being an important one, benefits compensation, classification, reorganization, performance management, and their disciplinary processes as well. The budget, as it's proposed right now, does pose a couple of challenges for us, and there have been a couple of changes. Since the mid-year report, the commissioners made the decision to retain the hearing officers as independent contractors rather than employees. So the Office of Budget Management has transferred funds from that salaries account to our contracts account to account for that difference. Unfortunately, when they did that, they estimated that the salaries for the administrator and the coordinator would be at the midpoints of the ranges, and both of us were hired near the top of our ranges, so that has left insufficient funds currently, but I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. The other thing is that one of our significant challenges is that it's very difficult for us without any history here to estimate what our hearing costs are going to be over the next year. We have tried to gather some information from people who have experience before the State Personnel Board of Review to get some idea of what to expect. But those have been, that data has varied widely, so we're still left with no history and our best guess at what those costs might entail for the next year or 2 years. Also, and the people in the back can attest to this, we are currently renting space or plan to be renting our space from the Planning Commission of the county because they're currently leasing the space that we're in. And that money is going to have to be shifted around over to our contracts account eventually because we don't have funds in there to cover the cost of the rental. Back to the point that I made about the personal services. At mid-year, we had $266,000 in there. Now there's $127,000 roughly in there. They have moved funds from our contracts account. We're moved to the contracts and professional services account to cover the cost of the hearing officers. Excuse me. We actually need $160,000 roughly for our salaries and for the commissioner's stipends for next year. And we've been advised by the Office of Budget Management to wait until we have some history with these hearings to have a better sense of how much money is going to be spent from that contracts fund to do that, or that line item. Contracts and professional services at mid-year was in fact $25,000. One of the things that they anticipated was transcription costs for the hearings. We have purchased digital voice recorders to sort of mitigate that cost. We're hoping that that drives that down. We can't completely eradicate that amount because we, even though we will have recordings of those hearings, if any of those hearings proceed to the Court of Appeals, we will have to produce a transcript, so we have to retain some ability to pay for those. And again, without knowing how many hearings we're going to have, we're challenged to come up with an exact figure about that. The 2012 proposed $192,000. That's about $160,000 for hearing costs. That gives us the ability to do 125 hearings in 2012, estimating that that would take about 16 hours per hearing, including all of the hearing costs, research and report recommendation preparation. That also includes $6,400 for training. We are required to training those officers, and we do anticipate, like I mentioned, doing that later in November. And again, we're hoping that the recorders reduce the cost for transcription services. Our controlled services mid-year was $43,000. In 2012, it's $70,000. Again, we may have to, and I'm relying heavily on the Office of Budget Management to advise me about how to move through this process, but they're thinking that we will have to move some money to our contracts account to cover the costs of the rental for our offices. We also anticipate there will be some costs for the database development, and we are hoping to be able to use the county's ISC department to help us develop that. If that's not going to be a viability, we might have to purchase some software to do that, but at this point, we still don't know the answer to how much that's going to be. Our mid-year projection for other operating was $12,000. We have added $2,500 to that to cover the costs of certified mail, because we do expect we are likely to have a large number of hearings, and we will be doing quite a few certified mailings. In summary, we do expect some changes going forward. We will need some additional funds at some point to cover transfer or to cover salaries, and we know that we're going to have to transfer some funds to cover the office rental costs. We're hoping that we will have some excess funds in our contracts, but it's too soon to know at this point. So I'd like to know if there are any questions.
Questions by my colleagues? Ms. Conwell.
I just have one. So, Director, the $462,949 that's recommended, that's going to, you're hoping that that's going to include the new electronic docketing system as well as the line items for the additional salaries that wasn't enough. So that's going to include everything. No additions.
To the chair, to the councilwoman through the chair, yes, that's our expectation. That's our hope.
Okay, so the 310 is included in that figure.
Correct.
Okay.
Good questions. Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard a lot of the discussion about items being added that you'd have to check. Do we have any total as to what the conservative number might be? How much more might be added to this?
To the councilman through the chair, we really are just too early in this process to tell at this point. I wish I could answer it better, but in 3 months I might have much more information to bring to it. But at this point, we have some sense, at least initially, of what the HR's operations and plans are going to be. But in terms of how many employees are actually going to wind up filing appeals, we just won't know until it happens.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Director, how much money would it take to correct the problem you mentioned with the two salaries that are
$33,273.
that's per year?
Per year.
$33,000.
Correct.
Okay. And Director, am I correct that any any appeals cases currently pending just have to wait for you to hire and train hearing officers, that there's no other way to clear those cases?
That's correct.
And if currently you only have 25 pending, what's the basis for estimating there might be as many as 125 hearings?
Estimates from the Human Resources Department regarding the number of adverse employment actions that they may be taking in the next year that would be accompanied by appeal rights.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you
you.
very much. And next on the agenda is the Department of Development, including economic development and the county airport and the other functions of this office. Director Benders.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam President, Committee. I'm Larry Benders, the Director of Development for the county. As you know, we manage economic development, community development, and the county airport. I'm with several staffers here today, including Jayanti, who is our fiscal manager, in the event that you ask a question that is beyond my comprehension, which should not be hard for you at all. I'm here presenting the general fund budget portion of the Economic Development and Development Department's total budget. The general fund budget, as you have in your information, is approximately, for 12 and 13, $7.4 million approximately, and that's 24 FTEs in that. But what you don't see in your budget book is the bulk of our budget, because we also manage 13 major grants from the state and the feds that total almost $30 million and 30 FTEs. So the general fund conversation is really only 20% of our total budget. So that's what you're talking about today. So when you look at that, as you know from our mid-year conversation, you look at that $7.4 million of general fund, $1.5 million of that is an airport expense. $1.5 million is salaries and benefits for the 24 FTEs. $1 million goes to Playhouse Square annually under that long-term agreement we have with Playhouse Square. So that leaves about $3 million in the general fund to do economic development, community development, and airport. If you recall, the charter said quite clearly that economic development is a primary activity of government, and yet only $3 million remains to be discretionary available to us under this current budget in the general fund. Hence the need for other resources. The Economic Development Fund that you are considering right now in another forum of the council. But the Department of Development has been a very good steward of that $7 million, which has been pretty consistent for the last several years, and going forward, it's flat. We have not added a lot of bodies. We have not added a lot of expense. We've managed very well. In fact, we're currently under our operating budget. When you take out regional collaboration, we're right on target for our spending. So we've done the job, and we will continue to do the job. But the resources we have, as you know, in the general fund are not significant to realize the aspirations of the charter. We need another set of resources if we're going to execute our strategy. So therefore, it's flat, under control, and I'm ready to answer any questions you might have on our general fund budget.
Questions? Councilman Schron,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman of the Economic Development Committee.
The five-year economic development plan calls for a number of short-term activities to be taking place this year. Can you go through those 5 steps as to where we are and what impact they have, any of which have an impact on that the general budget?
Absolutely. Through the chairman to Mr. Schron, Councilman, there are 5 activities, as I called key items in the plan. 1, reorganize Department of Development, which is well underway. We've had a 20% reduction in force to date. That includes general fund and grant-funded staff, and we continue to reorganize and move forward. 2 was improving intra-county coordination and collaboration, which we are well on the way. They had several sub-points. 1 was working with Employment Connection, which we have brought a person over from them, Michael Daly, to help us communicate our programs to our employers who are important constituents. Another subset was meeting regularly with Bonnie Tween in the Department of Public Works to ensure that we are getting the full measure of public works assistance in managing the airport and our other investments. 2. 3 was improving the coordination between the economic development intermediaries in the county, which we meet on a regular basis with the Team NEOS, Fund for Economic Future, Jumpstart, Magnet, and the like. And we have reassembled the DEAL team, which are the key people and 4 or 5 of the key intermediaries, including the City of Cleveland, to talk on a monthly basis about the major deals that are in the market. 4 was the creation of the Economic Development Fund, which is basically a general fund, to answer your question, sir, general fund neutral activity. But it provides tremendous leverage of the 24 FTEs we have in the general fund and the remaining 30 FTEs we have in the grant fund. And the 5th one will be a budget effect a year from now, because the 5th and final key action was to evaluate our programs, modify, kill, or expand the programs that need that appropriate attention. In summary, the plan really didn't drive the budget. The plan was simply one of creating capacity to realize the aspirations of the Charter for Economic Development, but we are working on all 5 of those key aspects right now.
Do any of those have an impact, either increasing or decreasing, other than the headcount reduction of the currently 20%? And where is that headcount ultimately going to end up? Do you have as far as internally within the department, by the time you get to the end of the reorganization?
Well, in the budget right now, in 12, is 1 reduction in FTE you can see in the budget. So that's the only, and it's relatively small as a function of the whole budget. I cannot tell you yet, sir, where we'll end up in total FTEs a year from now. This depends on what the decisions are with the Economic Development Fund, how we roll that out, how our partners in the community respond, and what kind of resources they make available, and how the collaborations play out. So we just don't know the total FTE number at this point, sir.
If the $100 million fund were to take place, and let's say it comes in at the $18 million target that we're talking about potentially for this year, what additional headcount are you going to need to administer that, to score applications, to do all of those kind of things? I don't see that necessarily showing up here in the budget, and whether that's going to come out of the fund for out of its own operation, the fund itself, or where's that headcount personnel going?
Through the chair to Mr. Schron, you'll see that in the deliberations on the Economic Development Fund as we get closer to it. The short summary is at most it's one incremental person that does not show in this budget yet because the fund has not been created. So at most it's 1 person. We believe in the short term we can handle it within the resources of the current department that we have right now.
Okay, just having watched what happened at the Clean Ohio Fund, it grew significantly as far as administrative staff to receive the applications, to score the applications, to create scoring techniques and things of that nature. And I just am concerned about where and how many people. I mean, obviously you need that in order to administer $100 million worth of transactional activity. And I just was trying to see what your forecasting is in that area.
Through the chairman to the councilman, yes, I respect what happened at Clean Ohio, but I would remind the councilman we do that activity right now. We currently receive all manner of grants, 39 different federal programs, plus 13 federal programs, plus our own general fund. We have a mechanism to score, to review already, whether it's a brownfield, whether it's a loan fund that runs through Jumpstart or someone else. So we already have the capacity to do those projects right now. And if I could remind you about just one of scale, the $3 million that we have in our budget is equal to the entire public investment in Circle East. So that $3 million that's incremental only would fund 1 project in 1 community. So that just to remind you about the need for the Economic Development Fund. But to the councilman, we have the capacity right now. It's just a question of scale. And if there's only 1 deal at $20 million, we don't need staffs of lots of people.
Well, I share the confidence that you do that we will have the fund before the end of the year. So therefore, the need for the personnel, at least I would anticipate at some point, is going to kick in to start, because I can also hope that you're going to see 20 or 30 or 40 applications are going to come out of the woodwork that are pending that we don't even know, and they're going to then you have to be scoring it, evaluating it, creating standards and everything of that nature.
Fair enough.
Okay. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Benders, Good morning, afternoon. My question is, what will be the process for applying for the $100 million? When you think about the storefront renovation dollars, we provide the dollars, but a business goes to their local ED who processes it. And to my understanding, the benefit is they know their building code policies and guidelines, and that saves some work on the county's end. Do you see something similar to that when it comes to businesses applying for this $100 million?
Through the chair to the councilperson, yes and no, sir. Similar. The yes part is there will be a process. The no is I don't anticipate it running through a local municipality. Rather, it starts with a strategy that we are informing right now. So we've talked to mayors and managers. We talked to many CDCs on Friday. We talked to our businesses on a regular basis to understand, as Director Howard said earlier, what are our customers and what do they need? Then we go to the Planning Commission and say, here's what our customers are telling us. Help us understand what the demography looks like, what the needs are, where are the activities in our county. So we have then a strategic framework in which we can say, here are levers, here are things to drive. Then our community will submit the applications. That's through our department. And we will review them with the strategic framework in mind. Then we take the results, as you'll see in the Economic Development Fund plan, to the CIC, the Community Investment Corporation, which we will reconstitute and use that as the first level after staff of vetting for strategic integrity, quality products, and investment going forward. Then we overlay other resources of money that we have with the Economic Development Fund, federal programs. Where does NSP, if it's still around at that time, where does that come in? Where does block grant come in? How can we really make big transformational moves with these projects? And then that comes to the determining body, the deciding body, through the normal contracting process. That's how we see it playing out.
So at my hearing, you're also saying then you're not going to automatically get part of the 100 million. If there are other resources to be leveraged, you're going to try to do that first.
Through the chair to the councilman, absolutely. I think the key is leverage, because if you think about the first question we ask is, what are the outcomes that we seek? How do we get those outcomes? Then that leads you, one of the last questions you say is, what are my funding sources to get that outcome? So I think we'll be very smart if we use all of the resources we have, including resources of public works and the like, all those resources to bear on a strategic investment strategy. That's the road we're on.
Mr. Chairman, will the focus remain on existing businesses, helping them to expand?
Through the chairman to the councilman, the plan has three, what we're calling verticals.
I didn't hear you.
The three verticals we're calling, the three focus areas. One is on innovation, think about entrepreneurship. Two is on business growth and retention, small, medium-sized companies. And the third is on land reclamation, revitalization, and preparation for development. So those are the three focus areas, and it goes everywhere from micro lending to identifying entrepreneurs for investment. So as you see, when you see the documents through the committees, it's quite expansive with many focus areas.
Are those three targets for your department or for that $100 million fund?
Through the chair to the councilman, both. For if we have a strategic investment strategy, then our department needs to be pointed to realize that strategy, of which the Economic Development Fund is yet one very important, but only one tool. There are general fund tools, they're limited, and also federal grants that we already pulled down, another asset or another tool in the mix for investment.
Mr. Chairman, your first focus point was entrepreneurship. Would you expect to provide some of that $100 million to help an entrepreneur with a new startup idea?
Through the chairman to the councilman, absolutely. Startup ideas, pre-seed money, micro lending, all those are considered in the fund.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, sounds like the monies will be used for more than just existing businesses to expand, but someone who wants to start a business can apply for these funds also.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Councilman Rogers, did you have a question?
Well, I just
On this point, okay.
On this point, to the directors and to Mr. Kelly, this will all be something that we're going to have a full hearing on. And in fairness, this The general budget, we don't even know that this will pass. Some of us are very confident that it'll move forward, but I don't want to be presumptive to know how my colleagues would vote on something of this nature. And just because there's subjects that are being brought out does not necessarily mean, as we all know, that'll be the final document as you see coming forward out of this. Ultimately, it's the legislative body here to bring forth what we see as it. So in fairness, it is on the agenda for this week, but it's been asked to defer it to a subsequent meeting, so it will be deferred. It will not be prepared for this Thursday's meeting at the direction of the Department of Development is asked to defer that. So I will be asking it to be deferred on the council, the committee meeting, unless you're prepared. Is that my understanding? Oh, well, if the horses are ready to go, the folks are ready to open the barn door. So if you're ready to go, I was deferring to, I haven't read my emails, but anyway, in fairness, then it will be ready to go on. If you're ready to go, it's on the docket, but we'll defer to, we'll defer to you folks as to what you want to do.
Councilman Rogers, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had, just for clarity, on the document that was passed out, on the bottom, it has under key performance measures that the department is in the process of creating a new performance plan. And on the book that was passed out, there were key performance measures, and there was a number of items listed out here. Will these measures that are in the book, will this be part of the new performance plan, or do you envision some things falling off?
Through the chairman to the council person, we think many things will fall off because the performance measures that were submitted are largely grant-funded outcomes, not general fund. So when you have a general fund conversation, it seems somehow challenging to talk about grant-funded outcomes when we don't know what the federal government's going to do with HUD, block grant money, NSP money, when we know stimulus money is going away next year. So that's when you see numbers of houses that were weatherized, that's not a general fund activity. Right. That's a grant. So we're trying to clean that up and try to say, are we having a general fund conversation or a grant fund conversation?
Gotcha. So just to follow up on that, when I see, for example, the total dollars leveraged with county programs, and it went from 2010 to 146 million to 75 million projected in 2012 and in 2013, I'm assuming. Is there a particular reason why it's trending downward like that, or is it no longer a focus of the? Sorry.
Through the chair to the council person, well, one, we have some challenges internally about how we account for how different of our staff, one staff versus another will account money. So that's the leverage funds. That's part of an issue. But the short answer is we really had fewer dollars to invest over the last few years from the general fund into other companies. As you know from prior conversations, we lost several $1 million to fund transition 2 years ago. That hasn't come back in this budget yet. So that's really, you're seeing the reduction of money we had available a few years ago that we don't have available today to leverage. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, the Economic Development Fund, another conversation, will take care of that.
Thank you.
Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a presentation item because I'm going to smirk at Ed Juris when I make this statement. Based on how I'm reading this, Ed Juris reports to you. That's how this is presented. I don't think Ed reports. I believe we passed the creation of a regional collaboration department, and I think probably for presentation purposes, we should have it presented in the budget that way, unless there's another alternative reason.
Through the chair to the council person, no, Mr. Juris does not report to me.
I didn't think so. That's why I made that statement.
It's for the pure convenience of presentation that the data was arranged in this fashion.
Okay, we may want to ask, since all departments are presented individually and independently, we may want to request that. Just somewhat of a confusing point there, and I have a question for Mr. Juris on his budget. Question: in the budget book we have, and actually it's not in this program here that we were presented today. Can you explain the two things: the model block program or model blocks program, and then why it's in the book but not in today's attachment, and then further to that, the program expenditures in the book says it's $3 million for 2012, but I don't see where that $3 million is being included in the budget numbers requested. Can you explain the whole scenario?
Absolutely. Through the chair to the councilperson, model blocks was an item, a working title for an initiative that did not make the budget. It was an item that the administration is looking at separately outside of the budget. It was in the earlier revision, but it should not have been. It is not reflected in the numbers that were the 7.8 million we're presenting today. The $3 million to which you're referring was in fact the general fund money that would have gone to fund that program. That program may come back, model blocks may come back in the future, but at this point it's not in the budget and not contemplated.
So, Mr. Chair, so in the $7 million, $7,347,000 for 2012 recommended, that was in the original budget. You're saying that $3 million was included in there, but when I look at today's numbers, it's only diminished by a couple $100,000 to 7.1 million. So I'm just trying to. I would expect that if the $3 million was not included, the general fund number would have been reduced.
Through the chairman
by $3 million.
Through the chairman to the councilperson, yes, that's true. However, I would submit that perhaps the narrative, the text, and the charts did not match up, sir.
Okay. Under the, and this just may be an explanation as well, in the original budget, the economic development staff, the FTEs, are listed as 10 for 2011, but I guess maybe I'm having a tough time delineating between economic development and development, meaning those folks dedicated to economic development activities versus those in the home weatherization program or the airport. So how do we, by looking at this, and maybe for further clarification and presentation, if the numbers, the FTE count can be broken out by those working on ED functions versus the airport versus the home weatherization or other programs within your purview? Because I don't know how you get to 10 on economic development when I think in your slides it's like 3 or 4.
Through the chairman to the councilperson, I believe the number actually that are over in my building are 7 people funded by the general fund called economic development. Then you add Mr. Kelly, you add a couple of other people, and you get up to 10. The airport number of FTEs, which are general fund, is 13. And the grant funded remainder is about 30 people. But next time we come back, we'll break it down for you and show you who's funded on what, by what,
that's right. Yeah,
what source.
Mr. T, you did bring up the point. That's right. I do remember now that some of the executive staff are being put into the budgets of the areas such as this for Mr. Kelly under economic development. And I believe those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Director. As you mentioned, the budget reflects a reduction of 1 FTE, and that being the case, you stated earlier that the budget is reduced by about 20%. Where does that number come from?
Mr. Chairman, that is a 20% reduction in total FTEs, reflecting general fund and grant-funded folk.
So, Director, does this mean that some people have been laid off?
Mr. Chairman, yes, absolutely. We laid off about 10 people or so throughout, or we had a resignation, we had a retirement, we had several layoffs through this calendar year.
Okay. Director, earlier this year, I know there was discussion that maybe the airport and the grant administration functions might move out of economic development to enable you to focus more on what we classically think of as economic development, even though those other things are somewhat related. Is that still on the table, or has a decision kind of been made to keep those areas as part of the development department?
Mr. Chairman, those decisions continue, those conversations continue to go forward with the Public Works Department, as you know, and with several other departments about how can we best align, place, manage these different functions. So those conversations are ongoing.
Director, the budget calls for $8 million to be reserved for the Economic Development Fund, which would, as I understand, basically pay for the debt service. My question is, under a best-case scenario, how much of that $100 million would we put out in 2012 and 13, and how much money for debt service might actually be needed?
Mr. Chairman, we don't know the answers to those questions yet. We're still in the process of, as I described earlier to the council person, trying to understand what are our customers saying they need to do, what has to be done. We'll overlay it in a strategic framework, and then we'll call for projects and requests. And when we start to see that, then we'll have a much better idea over the next couple of months what the volume might be.
Any other questions for development? Councilman Greenspan.
Just to follow on that, Mr. Chairman, so what you're saying is even though we might not need the 8 million to satisfy the debt, we still might though if the demand is there and a project comes up that might require more than 25 or 50% of the projects. We want to make sure that we've got the funding reserved and available in the event that a large project comes to town, as an example, or a series of projects that may require funding.
Through the chairman to the councilperson, I don't think we've gone quite that far yet, sir, to understand exactly what capacity do we want to have on day one. That's still an evolving conversation, and it's a fiscal one, a strategic one, and one just of good budget management. I don't think we're quite there yet. We will be soon, but not quite yet.
But fundamentally, you just want to have the funds available in the event that an opportunity presents itself.
Through the chairman to the councilperson, some portion of the funds from 1% to something else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Chairman? Do you imagine or envision a cap on how much any one project could have once the full $100 million is in place? You know.
Through the chair to the councilperson, I'm trying to remember we have quite a grid about eligibility. Like I believe we contemplate in some cases how you caps and what the appropriate investment levels are depending on what the project are. So we're considering that, and you'll see that as the project comes before the committee.
Thank you.
Councilman Sean.
Seeing how we keep going down this path, we might as well, sorry about that. We have the media here. It's the anticipation that we also look at these as loans, is it not the case?
Through the chairman to the councilperson, absolutely.
So they'll self-authenticate their own interest rate and be able to reimburse the fund for monies that are loaned out and generate actually its own capital.
Through the chairman to the councilperson, the intent is to have this primarily a revenue-generating resource. Yes.
And the $8 million is a worst-case scenario that if we had no loans, all at zero, that we would still have the ability to cover the cost of the funds.
The chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think now we'll call for a short break, and we'll return back at 2:45.